Our gospel reading today comes from the Gospel of Luke, the 12th chapter, verses 13 through 21. Jesus is gathered with a crowd, and in the crowd, someone asks Jesus to help him as he's caught in a family conflict. And in that moment, Jesus steps away from that particular thing to teach about the truth of the gospel. I invite you to follow along as we read this section of Scripture. Someone out of the crowd said, "Teacher, order my brother to give me a fair share of the family inheritance." And Jesus replied, "Mister, what makes you think it's any of my business to be a judge or mediator for you?" Then speaking to the people, Jesus went on, "Take care. Protect yourself against the least bit of greed. Life is not defined by what you have, even when you have a lot." And then Jesus told them this story. The farm of a certain rich man produced a terrific crop. And he talked to himself, "What can I do? My barn isn't big enough for this harvest." And then he said, "Here's what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build bigger ones. Then I'll gather in all my grain and goods and I'll say to myself, 'Self, you've done well. You got it made. You can retire now. Take it easy. Have the time of your life.' Well, just then God showed up and said, 'Fool, tonight you die. And your barn full of goods, who gets it?' That's what happens when you fill your barn with self and not with God." A more traditional translation says, that's what happens when you don't build up riches towards God. I don't watch a lot of TV, but I probably watch too much. And one of those inclinations is there's a show that I simply can't stand to watch. It's not that I hate it. It's that it just creeps me out. And I can't even tell you, it's hoarding. It's called hoarding. Why would you have a show called hoarding with like a how-to? And trust me, the people on the show, they know how to. This is just wrong. That's why I can't stand to watch it. Just 5 minutes, I'm like, this is terrible. This is terrible. They can't not keep bringing it in to the part that it starts to rot. Honestly, I can't in the sanctuary tell you some of the stuff that you see that they walk on top of. They can't sleep in their beds. They forget having trails in the house. Even the trails in the house are compacted because they've crunched that. That's the part they've been walking on in the piles. And that's the nice room. Can't go into kitchens and bathrooms. Oh my. An abundance is a gift to hand over to God. We are so richly blessed, especially in the first world. And what does this scripture today speak to us in the first world where we literally build bigger barns? I went past on our trip to Canada, we went through Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, on the other side of the bridge. And we went past one of those self-storage places, which in the first place makes you go, what is it with a culture? Because, first it was, when I was growing up, to have a 2-car garage. That's pretty cool. I remember when we got our second car, Dad's car that he drove to work. And we had the family car, a station wagon. Oh yeah, for some of you, a station wagon, never mind. Someone will tell you after service. And then you got the two-car door, and then you got a side. So now you got a three-car garage. And now that's not enough. We go and we buy a storage unit, put more stuff in, because we already filled that up. Well, we passed a 4-story storage facility. 4 stories of these things. Almost keep your eyes on the road. I need to, Joe Dell says I drive like this. Especially when I'm in Canada, because I could miss a moose. And I don't want to do that. We saw 3. This sense of hoarding. And I want to take that into this fool. He's productive. He does well at what he feels called to do. He's a farmer, and he farms very well. And he doesn't scam anybody. He gets it done honestly by hard work. Where is the foolishness? The foolishness is that he's become possessed by his possessions. They own his life. Listen to his agenda. And I says to myself, self, and he congratulates himself. Self, well done. His universe is all right there within himself. Just like we shared with the kids, God's love is sufficient. That's what Paul says in Scriptures. My grace, my unconditional love is sufficient. And that's what we're seeking, isn't it? That's what we want. Give us today our daily bread. That's what we need. And God says, look at the lilies. They're better than Solomon in all his golden robes. And they don't really worry. We've become possessed by our possessions, by the race to get enough. And then to get a little bit more. And to make sure at least I have more than they do. And our angst of scarcity has warped us. One of the most powerful moments I've had in mission trips is to take a bunch of youth to Juarez, Mexico. Juarez sits literally across the river from El Paso, which sadly screams headlines this morning. And I'll get back to that. Well, I took being the van driver, you get 3 troops of mission teams, and you drop them off at different sites. And the second group I dropped off, they got out of the car, and they couldn't find the house they were supposed to work on. All these good kids, and they're great kids from their communities of abundance, and that reference point, they couldn't find the house they're supposed to. Where are we supposed to? We're supposed to work on a house. And it was right there in front of them. That shed that has corrugated tin on the top and is held together with garbage bag and post and pole and cardboard, that's the house that the family of 6 is living in. It's always great for those kids to go to those moments and realize in the scheme of things how big their barns are. And that's a good thing. There's no sin in wealth. It's the love of money, Jesus says. It's that we hoard it more. And we make sure we have enough and a little bit more than enough, and we're set. And then we'll see if we can find stuff for others. Then we'll see. I've got enough to keep me comfortable. Anything else? Jesus says, no, it's first fruits that you give to God. It's the first fruits you give to God. That's where giving starts, because you trust in God. And God is faithful. That's the truth of the word Emmanuel. I will be with you. God with us. That's literally what Emmanuel means. God with us. I will be with you always, even in this moment, in abundance and in scarcity, so that you can trust me and know that I am with you in the lean times, so that you need not be trampling on your own stuff and living in such a disgusting way. And I don't mean that about the show. I simply need to go back to our Old Testament reading and others, Amos and Hosea, who say, and Isaiah, who say, you know what? your worship makes me puke. That's what God says. That's a literal translation from the Old Testament. Because your hearts aren't mine. You go through the motions. And Amos says, I've come to Jerusalem. Amos was this amazing agribusinessman from outside of Jerusalem, and he came to Jerusalem. I mean, this is Jerusalem. This is where the temple is. This is where the people are the most devout and true to God because they have the temple with them, and God lives in the temple. How can these people not permeate the truth of love that sits in the midst of them? And again, I told you before I left on vacation, your homework was to go read Amos because it's just fantastic. And he says, when I came through the gates of the city, I saw someone who was sold into slavery for a pair of sandals. Oh, you're all good at going to the temple when it's temple time, but your lives do not reflect the truth of God's love and who Yahweh is. And that's what Jesus says, you're a fool. You're putting your trust in things that rot. And when you die, where does it go? Well, how's that going to help you? Who gets it? It's going to rot in the barn. That's not the stuff. Make sure you're rich towards God. Make sure your lives have an abundance of grace, have an abundance of love, have abundance of holiness, righteousness, justice, caring, compassion, godliness, self-control. Galatians 5:22, it's all right there. Make sure you're rich in that. Be rich in that, because that pours out into the world around you. They all bespeak of relationship. You can't be kind to no one. You can't be loving to no one. It implies you're loving someone. You're being kind to this person. Are you kind? Oh, very kind to who? Not me. That's called selfish. We heard about what selfish is in the Old Testament reading. No. And look about you. This sounds cheesy. And I'll get to the cheesy part in a minute. So let me back up and I don't often go to headlines. But we need a healing in our country. We're at a point now that one mass shooting takes a headline away from the other mass shooting. What's wrong with us? And the CEO of Walmart says, I can't believe I had to write this letter twice in the same week, because remember, just 4 days ago, there was another mass shooting at another Walmart. See, we forgot about that one. Oh, yeah. We had so many mass shootings this week, we forgot about one of them. We need a healing. We need to start putting our lives in a richness towards God, because this richness towards stuff is killing us. It is killing us. And boy, what a truth to, hey, this night, your life is mine, God says. You'll be in heaven with me. Think of the victims of the shootings. Doubt that's what they thought their day would end, just by going to Walmart. So pour your lives in a way that builds richness in heaven. And here comes the, sounds cheesy, but I can't say this with more truth. It was good to be back. It is good to be back. But I didn't know how good it was till I saw your faces walk through the door this morning. I've fallen in love with you in 2 years. And I hope to more and more, that's one of the things that poured into my heart while I was in prayer. You know, when you're in the woods, you have really good times to think. I want to really let you know how much, starting now that I'm back. It's so good to be amongst friends and family, to gather with the people who are your support and nurture and care and love and for which you pray for daily. It is so good. So really good to be back with you. And again, I knew that, but it was just driven home this morning as each face walked through. in that truth